The deck was not merely cold. It was a thief of heat, a patient one, climbing through the composite soles of Maya Lee's boots, through the damp seams of his socks, through the old ache in his right knee that always remembered vacuum exposure before his mind did. Tracer fire stitched white lines across docking spine 9 in jagged diagonals, too bright to look at directly, and too fast to trust in peripheral vision, while the sound of failing clamps cracked through the steel like knuckles snapping in a silent room. The air smelled wrong for a station dock. Not ozone and hot fuel and machine grease. Burnt coolant, ionized dust, singed fur, and that high metallic tang that came when emergency med foam had been atomized by gunfire. He did not panic. Panic burned oxygen and judgment, and both were expensive. 1 for pulse, he said into his own helmet, voice low enough that the suit mic barely caught it. 2 for breath, 3 for hands steady. His left glove found the hard edge of his wrench roll clipped to his belt. Thumb to socket adapter, index to flex handle, middle finger to magnetic spike case, ring finger to the insulated cutter he had sharpened so many times the handle had grooves like a prayer bead. Sequence first, then motion. Muscle memory dragged his heartbeat down from a sprint to something he could bargain with. Around him, armored Marines in slate-black plate moved like predatory shadows under strobe alarms, heavy tails and digitigrade legs taking long, silent strides where human knees needed careful placement. Above them, hereditary officers in white command coats shouted over the deck speakers with all the calm of people born into priority access. Maya stayed low beside a cargo cradle with 2 dead grav lifters and a spilled crate of ceramic couplings rolling lazily in weak artificial gravity. One coupling tapped his boot, tapped again, then spun away in a tiny orbit as the station compensated for pressure loss in the adjacent tube. 3 compartments down, somewhere behind a wall of utility conduits, a decompression siren started, and then cut out mid-wail, like a throat pinched shut. The half-second silence that followed felt worse than the alarm. Spine 9, report clamp status. The order came over local channel in clip station standard, genderless and bored, as if somebody were asking for inventory counts. Maya keyed his mic. 9A through 9D are throwing asymmetrical load errors. 9E just dropped handshake. 9F is lying to you and to itself. A pause, then identify. Lee, civilian hull technician, contract tier 3. Another pause, longer this time, long enough for class to settle in the gap, like dust. Stand by for military engineering support. He almost laughed. Almost. Military engineering was 2 spines away and blocked by a shutter jam, according to the maintenance feed frozen in the corner of his visor. Stand by was what people in clean coats told labor when labor was supposed to become debris in an orderly fashion. Across the dock, an evac team in orange pressure skins dragged a gurney behind a stack of fuel drums, then abandoned it when another line of tracer fire cut the walkway in front of them. One of the responders looked back once, mask reflecting white streaks, then vanished through a hatch that sealed before the second responder made it through. The trapped one hammered twice on the metal with a gloved palm and then sprinted along the catwalk rail, head down, toward the next cross tube. Maya forced his focus back to data. Threat mapping kept fear from breeding stories. Stories got people dead. Incoming fire lanes. Customs gantries north and west. Probably 2 shooters minimum based on angle spread. Caliber high enough to chip structural plating, but not punch armored bulkhead. Pressure drops. Tube 4 at 7%. Tube 5 at 11 and climbing. Tube 7 fluctuating with every clamp. Shutter. Docking telemetry. Pairs failing instead of sequence. meaning either sabotage or a software cascade seeded by physical damage. Visual feed from external cameras blinked twice, returned in static, then painted a silhouette of an inbound ship broadside to the dock and drifting hard. Hull lines Lynx built. Old war geometry. Armor, lacquer, scorched to matte, black. Its transponder should have carried a war registry. Instead, it flashed null, null, null. Then a crest in silver slashwork on black. Widow mark. Lynx script. Mourning rank and diplomatic hazard in one symbol. He felt his mouth go dry even through recycled suit air. Control. Inbound vessel has clan insignia, he said. Widow crest. Verify diplomatic channel before you flag it rogue. No answer. On open comm, two officers spoke over each other about lock sectors and legal authority, neither one saying the word widow, neither one acknowledging the crest pulsing on every screen like a heartbeat. A shock ran through the deck, not electrical but structural, and Maya's teeth clicked hard enough to make his jaw ring. Above him, emergency shutters began to descend, thick composite slabs designed to isolate breach zones. They dropped in staggered sections, then stuttered, then locked halfway with a grinding shriek that vibrated in his sternum. Half-open shutters turned the docking spine into a maze of throat-high steel and blind corners, a kill funnel written by engineers who had never expected people to fight inside their own evacuation logic. Perfect, he muttered. Love a half-implemented safety feature. His suit, HUD, threw red blooms across his vision. Thermal spikes along the main clamp spine, overload warning in the transfer bus, and a line of text from station legal AI that had somehow jumped into maintenance channel. Unauthorized intervention will trigger criminal review under Coterie Net statute. 14b. Even the threat messages were formal. Even fear had paperwork. He slid toward the primary service panel on 9C, keeping one shoulder against the cargo cradle, then ducked as a rail shard screamed past and buried itself in an overhead conduit. Coolant mist burst downward in a glittering sheet. For a second, he was inside freezing rain lit by emergency strobes, every droplet bright as a cut gem. Then the mist hit his visor and turned opaque, and he swore softly as his suit fans fought to clear it. Maya, came a voice on tight beam, close enough to his frequency key that only one person on the shift would use it. June Ortega from Central Maintenance, his oldest friend and worst influence. Tell me you are not on 9. I'm on 9. Static. Then Jun exhaled a curse in 2 languages, and neither was for emphasis. Shutters trapped us at 7. We can't reach you. I'm pushing you the old clamp firmware pack and a prayer. Prayer costs extra. Invoice me. Also, Station Command just tagged that Lynx hull as provisional hostile. Maya looked back at the crest flashing on his feed, at the vessel drifting too close and too wrong, engines firing in tiny corrective bursts that said somebody aboard was fighting dead controls with bare will. They're going to impound a damaged ship in live fire? They're going to do what keeps liability lower than funeral expenses. The channel hissed, cut, returned as overlapping alarms drowned Jun's next words. Maya caught only fragments. Pressure door. If you can, don't be a hero. He closed the channel and held still long enough to hear the dock through the suit shell. Metal ticks from thermal strain. Low bass thump from distant impacts. The insect buzz of damaged relays arcing behind paneling. Under all of it, the deep, repetitive clack of docking claws failing one by one, downline like giant jaws trying to bite and missing. He opened the 9C panel manually because the access motor had cooked itself. Inside, Diagnostics lights flickered in uneven rhythm. Green trying to become amber. Amber trying to become dark. 2 control rods had sheared off clean. A third was bent into a curve that no factory tolerance would admit existed. He reached in with insulated grips, withdrew a handful of scorched microfuses, and felt the clamp assembly shudder through his forearms as the inbound vessel scraped the spine outside. "Control, Lee," he said louder now. "I need a temporary lock on all non-essential traffic lanes, and I need it 30 seconds ago." "Denied," the same bored voice replied, now edged with irritation. "Military operation in progress." "This is a maintenance operation in progress. If these clamps go full failure, your military operation turns into decompression lottery for 400 civilians." Silence. Then, as if reading from policy, "Liability routing acknowledged. Request under review." Under review. While Steele screamed. He wanted to put his helmet through the nearest official window. Another jolt hit, harder, and a section of catwalk to his left tore away from its mountings and swung down on one hinge. 2 Marines leaped clear. A third misjudged, boot skidding on coolant frost. Maya moved without deciding to, throwing his magnetic line. The hook caught the Marine's forearm plate and yanked him into the cargo cradle with enough force to dent both suit and pride. The Marine stared at him through gold visor lenses, chest heaving, then gave one sharp nod and rolled away toward cover, as if accepting rescue from a contract tech required immediate tactical amnesia. Maya reeled the line back with shaking hands. He pretended we're steady. 1 for pulse, 2 for breath, 3 for hands steady. The inbound vessel struck the docking envelope at last, not with a clean lock, but with a grinding impact that sent vibration through every bolt in the spine. External camera feed cleared for 3 seconds. He saw scorched Lynx hull plating, a cracked sensor crown, and a narrow view through the forward command glass. Silhouettes moving in hard, economical bursts. One figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with rank bands bright against soot. Then the feed died again. On the main channel, an officer barked, "Seal and isolate 9. Mark all personnel beyond shutter line as non-recoverable until hostiles are neutralized." Maya looked up at the half-lowered shutter 10 meters ahead, at the Marines behind him, at the evac workers still sprinting from hatch to hatch, at the Lynx widow crest pulsing on his visor like a wound that refused to close. Non-recoverable. A neat word for people still breathing. The clamps snapped again, louder this time, and the whole spine lurched as if something enormous had tried to tear free. He understood it then with the ugly clarity of a wrench hitting metal. He was the only certified hull technician still on 9, the only one low enough in station hierarchy to be left where he knelt, and the only person close enough to stop a wounded ship from ripping loose, venting half the dock, and turning everyone trapped in this steel corridor into the same anonymous casualty report. Outside the hull, tracer fire kept sowing white lines through the smoke. Inside his helmet, he counted to 3 and reached deeper into the burning panel. The insulated cutter slipped between 2 warped bus rails, and Maya twisted until the metal complained in a thin, angry whine, then settled. Heat pushed against his gloves from inside the panel like breath from an oven door. He withdrew his hand, flexed each finger once, and checked the tremor pattern against memory. Ring finger stable. Thumb starting to flutter. Adrenaline, not nerve damage. Useful distinction. 1 for pulse. 2 for breath. 3 for hands steady, he said, quiet and flat. Each word timed to the blink of the failing diagnostic strip. He repeated it until his chest stopped trying to sprint ahead of him. He had learned the ritual in a field repair bunker 12 years earlier, with the roof shaking and a medic who smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee teaching mechanics to count, because mechanics who counted kept systems alive. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Count the seams on your glove if your mind tried to run. Count bolt heads if your vision tunneled. Count anything that belonged to the present moment. He did it now, with his forehead almost touching the open panel, coolant vapor purling and freezing on his visor edges, while another impact shuddered through docking spine 9 and dropped a dusting of insulation fibers onto his shoulders, like gray snow. The panel refused clean logic. 9C's local controller reported green path continuity while the physical relay was visibly scorched through. The handshake to 9D flickered between passive and hostile modes in intervals too regular to be random. Somebody had patched firmware on top of emergency firmware, a bureaucratic sandwich of bad decisions where each layer assumed a calmer day. Maya pulled Jun's packet from his suit cache and watched the checksum crawl at funeral speed across his HUD. "Come on," he muttered. "You can gossip about my certifications later." The progress bar stalled at 92%. A rail impact rang across the shutter above him, bright sparks spraying through the half-meter gap like brief orange rain. He flinched, then locked his shoulders down by force. Panic burned oxygen and judgment. Panic made hands clumsy. Clumsy hands made memorial walls. 94. 96. Complete. He loaded the old firmware into a sandbox partition and kept live control isolated with manual jumpers scavenged from the dead grav lifter behind him. It was crude, ugly electrical surgery, but ugly systems still held pressure if the math was right. He routed command authority through his local tool module, spoofed a maintenance supervisor signature he technically did not possess, and pushed a test pulse. 9C answered. 9D coughed, failed, and answered on the second pulse. "Good," he whispered. "Bad attitude, but good." A warning ribbon erupted across his HUD. Cautery net monitor. Unauthenticated command path detected. Review escalation in 0040. 40 seconds to legal trouble. Maybe less to decompression. He picked decompression first. Maya snapped open his wrench roll fully and laid tools on the deck in sequence, even as tracer lines flashed past the cargo cradle. Adapter, hex spine, magnetic spikes, fiber patch, torque key. He touched each one with 2 fingers. A mechanic's litany. Every motion had to be deliberate enough that his body could follow even when his mind wanted to split into 10 directions. Around him, station noise rose and fell in violent layers. Alarms with clipped synthetic vowels shouted commands in Lynx trade dialect from somewhere beyond the shutters. The bass cough of distant cannon fire reverberating through plating, and underneath it all, the constant groan of stressed metal behaving like an animal trying not to scream. In the 90 seconds since command had labeled everyone beyond the shutter line non-recoverable, the deck temperature had dropped another 3 degrees, according to his suit telemetry. Cold stole dexterity first and optimism second. He toggled exosuit heaters from economy mode to emergency and accepted the battery penalty. His gloves warmed by a fraction. Enough. A Marine slid into cover near him. One knee plate cracked, breathing harsh through a damaged rebreather intake. Feline ears flattened under the helmet rim gave away pain even before the bloodless stiffness in her posture did. She tapped his shoulder twice with 2 armored knuckles and pointed at the sparking panel. "You can hold it?" she asked, voice distorted but steady. "If the station stops trying to assassinate me with policy memos." Her visor angled toward the red legal countdown on his display. "Then, do not die before the paperwork catches up." "Working on it." She pushed off and moved toward the catwalk gap with a limping, disciplined gait, rifle up, tail balancing each step. Working class sarcasm, military pragmatism, same species divide as always, and still a temporary truce when bolts started flying. Maya watched her go for half a second, then forced his eyes back to the relay block. Attention was a currency. Spend it wrong once and you got audited by physics. He bridged the scorched relay with the fiber patch, sealed the line with quick cure resin, and held it in place with the magnetic spike while it set. 10 seconds. 12. 15. His right knee flared with old pain from the deck cold, and memory tried to intrude. Another compartment. Another failing seal. Someone shouting his name in a vacuum suit gone opaque. He shut the image down before it could take shape and went back to numbers. Clamp load threshold was 68% and climbing. If 9E dropped, the incoming Lynx hole would yaw and shear the coupler ring. If the ring sheared, tube 5 would vent. If tube 5 vented, evac routes from civilian berths went with it. Sequence, not story, he told himself, the second phrase in his ritual set. Fix what's in front of you. He keyed local channel. Control Lee again. I have temporary command on 9C and partial response from 9D. I need a hard freeze on automatic clamp release logic now. The bored dispatcher voice returned, strained thin by competing feeds. Freeze denied. Coterie net has initiated hostile vessel containment. Containment cuts my clamps loose. Containment is authorized. So is basic physics. Pick one. No answer. Just static and another impact that shook grit from the shutter seam. Maya bit down on a laugh that was half frustration, half disbelief. Bureaucracy really could watch a hull burn while debating which form to stamp. Jun's tight beam pinged twice, weak through interference. Maya opened it with his wrist interface while both hands stayed on the panel. Maya, you alive? Jun's voice came fractured by static, syllables clipping. We got partial camera from external truss. Your inbound Lynx is dragging on 3 points. 4's gone. If 4 goes, she'll torque the whole spine. I know. Do you, though? Because command just told us to prep casualty accounting. Put me down for busy. A short, ragged laugh came through. You always did flirt with disasters above your pay grade. Disasters are honest. Pay grades lie. Jun inhaled sharply, as if about to argue, then switched tone to pure procedure. I'm routing you a manual clamp timing table. Old Dockyard 1, pre-war, back when people trusted technicians more than legal AI. That sentence belongs in a museum. Catch, then move. You have maybe 3 minutes before 9E cooks. The file arrived. Tiny, dense, ugly data. The kind written by mechanics for mechanics with no concern for elegance and every concern for survival. Maya overlaid it with live telemetry and started building a map in his head and on his visor at once. Clamp A, lagging by 0.8 seconds. Clamp B, overbiting by 6 millimeters. Clamp C, dead unless externally forced. Clamp D, hunting position and chewing power. He could stabilize the set if he physically reseated C and D in sequence while spoofing false positive load values to keep Coterie net from triggering release. It would require leaving the panel, crossing open deck under fire and crawling under a half-dropped shutter with live current arcing overhead. Bad plan. Only plan. Jun, he said, if this goes loud, archive my work order under routine maintenance. Routine? Routine for this station. Jun was quiet for a heartbeat. Copy. And Maya? Yeah. Don't make me train another human to swear at alien firmware. Channel cut. He sealed the panel with 2 temporary latches, knowing it would not survive another direct hit, and rose into a crouch. His exosuit servos whined in protest at the sudden load. He checked pressure, integrity, oxygen reserve, battery, tool inventory. Checklist completed meant one less decision later. He hooked the magnetic line to his belt, clipped the spike case to chest rig, and pulled the torque key free. The world beyond the cargo cradle had changed while he worked. Smoke had thickened into layered bands, darker near the ceiling where heat pooled, pale near the deck where coolant mist kept trying to freeze. Emergency strobes painted everything in alternating red and white, turning Marines into moving silhouettes and every dangling cable into a striking snake. Through the shutter gap, he could see only fragments of the inbound Lynx vessel. Scorched plating, a torn emblem panel, one maneuvering thruster pulsing in uneven bursts that made the whole ship twitch against its failing locks. Its widow crest still flashed across every tactical surface in his HUD, overridden and reasserting itself in stubborn intervals as if the ship itself refused anonymity. He started forward low, using overturned crates and maintenance pylons as cover. 2 shots sparked against the deck ahead of him, not aimed for his center mass, but close enough to teach obedience. He stopped, flattened, recalculated angles. Incoming lanes from the customs gantries remained active, but there was a blind wedge beneath a broken service arm if he timed movement to the strobe cycle. He counted the lights. 1, 2, move. 1, 2, freeze. The ritual merged with motion until fear became rhythm. At the broken service arm, he paused and expanded the map again, this time beyond metal and trajectories, into the social terrain that was trying to kill him as efficiently as gunfire. Station command wanted liability minimized, not lives maximized. Marines wanted hostile fire suppressed, not dock geometry preserved. Coterie net wanted procedural purity, not context. Civilians wanted doors that opened and air that stayed in the right places. The Lynx widow vessel wanted docking authority and ward protection under treaty law. Each system had its own rule book. All of them were colliding in this single corridor, where he knelt with a torque key and a fake supervisor credential. Environmental threat was measurable. Social threat wore uniforms. He pulled up legal matrix tags from his maintenance cache, a thing only a paranoid contract tech would keep, and cross-referenced them with the crest code still blinking through interference. Widow Right vessels had dependent transport protections under Accord Tier 7, but only after manifest verification. Manifest verification required stable dock lock for 18 continuous seconds. 18 seconds might as well have been an era in the present chaos. Still, it meant there was a narrow legal path that did not end in impound or purge. He filed it beside the clamp timing sequence, another piece in the same survival puzzle. A station-wide announcement thundered through compromised speakers, each word clipping on damaged circuits. All unauthorized personnel on Spine 9, surrender tools and await security retrieval. Maya looked at the live fire line chewing at the far railing and snorted once. Retrieval. Sure. He opened a private maintenance log with voice transcription active, speaking clearly despite the pounding in his throat. Technician Lee, Tier 3. Recording emergency intervention rationale. Automatic systems conflict with physical stability. Proceeding manual reseat under immediate hazard. If command wants to charge me later, spell my name right. Not bravery. Documentation. If he lived, records mattered. If he did not, records still mattered to whoever reviewed the wreckage and asked why clamps held 1 minute longer than expected. Another transmission broke through, this one from an unknown source using encrypted Lynx protocol mapped onto station common. A female voice, low and precise, despite distortion, spoke 5 clipped words. Maintenance unit, report your position. Maya froze with one glove on the deck, eyes locked on the blinking widow crest. Threat map and legal map and mechanical map all suddenly converging on the same point and answered before caution could overrule necessity. "Spine 9, inner truss," he said. "And I'm trying to keep your ship attached to the station." Static chewed the channel for a heartbeat. Then the same voice returned. Closer now, no longer filtered through distance or diplomatic routing. "Do not move, Technician Lee. Mark your panel with an active beacon." Maya thumbed the emergency beacon on his belt and jammed it onto the deck grate beside him. The little cylinder blinked cobalt through smoke, a stubborn pulse in a red strobe wash. He had heard of Lynx command officers the way mechanics heard of hull breaches in far sectors, through rumor, through casualty numbers, through stories that grew claws in retelling. Captain Consort Vera Tal had existed in those stories as a silhouette with rank bands and clean victories. He had never expected her voice to land in his ear while he knelt on frost-slick steel with a torque key in his hand. A mass shadow crossed the shutter gap. Then another. He tracked angles, waiting for muzzle flare from the customs gantry line, and caught motion that was neither marine nor station security. Too low, too fast, using the blind wedges between strobe pulses like she had rehearsed this corridor in her sleep. She came over the dropped section of catwalk in one vault, boots striking steel without the heavy clatter of station armor, coattails cut short for combat, black-slashed silver widow crest fixed at her shoulder, where soot had not yet swallowed it. Her eyes found him at once through the haze, pale gold, narrowed with calculation rather than panic. Tall, broad through the shoulders, fur dark as burnt copper along her jawline and wrists, where gloves ended, she looked less like an officer arriving for negotiations and more like a blade that had learned etiquette after the war. "Lee?" she said. "Maya," he answered, because he did not know why but needed his own name in the room. The shot came from above and west, a rail shard screaming down the corridor with a keening pitch his body recognized a fraction late. Vera moved first. One step, one hard impact, and his back hit deck plate hard enough to jar his teeth while her forearm braced across his chest. The shard cut through the conduit behind where his throat had been and detonated a spray of blue-white sparks and hot fragments. Something hissed. Coolant vapor exploded into the air like torn cloud. For a second, there was only weight. Heat from her armor through his suit, and the metallic bite of ionized dust flooding his filters. "Still breathing?" she asked, voice flat with command. He nodded once. "Good. Keep doing that." She rolled off him and pulled him by his harness to the lee of a maintenance pylon in one practiced motion. Her gloves were reinforced with matte ceramic and claw channels, each fingertip ending in retractable black arcs that clicked once against his chest plate as she released him. Predator hardware. Military issue. Her insignia carried 3 siege bars and the consort braid braided over one shoulder, ceremonial thread singed at the ends. Maya's badge had skidded free when she tackled him. He reached for it. She was faster. She scanned it with a wrist module, copied the maintenance token, and slotted the original back into his palm before he could object. "You knew that would spoof local doors?" he said. "I knew your station designed its emergency architecture by committee," she replied. "Committee systems always trust maintenance more than soldiers." She keyed the copied token into a locked utility node beside the half-dropped shutter. The panel rejected her twice, then blinked amber and spat an override tree onto her wrist display. She selected a path that no one without dock schematics and bad intentions would have found in open fire. "You've been in this station before," Maya said. "During the armistice inspections. Your administrators served fermented kelp in crystal bowls and lied through every course. Another round hammered the service arm above them. Metal screamed. A relay box tore loose and bounced across the deck, trailing sparks. Vera looked down the corridor, then back to him. Report clamp integrity in 10 words. He swallowed, forced the map into language. C and D failing. E, near thermal runaway. Release logic hostile. Can you lock them by hand? If I get to the truss and live long enough to curse about it. That was 11 words and a complaint. A flicker crossed her mouth, not a smile, something sharper. Acceptable. By the time the third shutter alarm cycled, the corridor had narrowed into alternating lanes of smoke and tracer glare. Marines had pulled back to hard cover on command frequency. Not routed, just repositioning around a problem none of their doctrine wanted to own. A diplomatic hull under hostile classification, trapped in the same kill geometry as civilians and labor. Vera toggled channels on her wrist and issued 2 clipped commands in Lynx high dialect. Return fire shifted at once, not heavier, smarter, walking suppressive bursts up the customs gantry rails long enough to carve a movement window along the deck. Move on my count, she said. He followed her cadence as if it were another maintenance sequence. 3, 2, 1, sprint. She took point through coolant mist, shoulders low, tail aligned as counterbalance each time she cut left. He kept one hand on his tool harness and one on the magnetic line clipped to her belt ring because visibility had collapsed to a tunnel of strobe, smoke, and sparks. Twice she stopped him with a flat palm against his sternum before he registered live arcs licking across torn conduit. Once, she shoved him behind a collapsed loader just as a burst chewed the pylon where his helmet had been. Contact with feared counterparts in station gossip always sounded theatrical. In reality, it felt procedural and terrifying, like being drafted into someone else's precision. They dropped under a ruptured pipe rack where heat hit like opened furnace doors. Steam vented from a split coolant manifold, then flash froze at the edges where vacuum leaks pulled temperature down in violent swings. Vera cut a dangling cable with one clawed glove, threaded them through a maintenance crawl gap, barely wide enough for his exosuit shoulders, and scanned the far end before waving him on. Her scent filtered through ionized air and burnt insulation when she moved close. Smoke. Antiseptic. The faint resin note Lynx officers used on armor seams. It anchored her to the present more than rumor ever had. Not myth. Not monster. A commander solving 1 meter of disaster at a time. They reached a recessed valve station half shielded by a cargo brace. Vera dropped to one knee beside him with the compact stillness of a trained striker and opened a hollow strip from her wrist projector. His own telemetry mirrored over it, clamp loads rising in angry red bars. You broadcasted that the release logic turned hostile, she said. Explain. CauteryNet flagged your hull provisional hostile. It attached containment protocol to my dock systems. Containment here means auto-release if load exceeds legal threshold. Legal threshold would vent this spine. CauteryNet reads statutes, not screams. Her ears angled back once, a small betraying gesture under otherwise perfect control. My dependent manifest is valid under Accord Tier 7. I transmitted widow rights codes on approach. Command ignored them. No stable lock, no manifest verification. Then we force stable lock. He looked at her, at the confidence stated as a mechanical fact. Under active fire. Under active fire. She tapped the hollow bars. What do you need? He pointed at the truss schematic with a grease-smudged glove. Manual reseat on C&D. Heat bleed from E into sacrificial loop. I need 16 to 18 seconds where your hull holds angle and doesn't kick thrusters. I can hold 12 without tearing my lateral manifold. Then we find 6 more seconds somewhere between engineering and prayer. Prayer is not a tool. Neither is optimism, and we still use that. She made that sharp, almost smile again and killed the hollow. Overcom came a burst of station legal text in monotone. Final review. Window initiated. Non-compliant maintenance path. Subject to detention. Maya barked a laugh he did not quite feel. Great. Now I'm dying in a paperwork exception. Vera turned her head toward him, profile cut in strobe light, and said with aristocratic precision, "If you continue making jokes at my expense, Technician Maya Lee, I will assign you a formal clan title solely to inconvenience your future forms." He blinked at her. She added, "Deadpan. This is a threat." Despite the gunfire, despite the frost and alarms and his pulse still hammering too high, the corner of his mouth lifted. "Noted, Captain Consort. Consort is ceremonial. In this corridor, call me Vera. Then, in this corridor, call me Maya." A blast hit somewhere aft, deep enough to thump through both their armor. The deck lurched. Overhead lights flickered to darkness. Then emergency red returned in a dimmer cycle. Pressure warnings cascaded across his HUD. Tube 5 had dropped another 2%. Vera rose and offered a hand. He took it and stood, knees protesting. She pointed toward a narrow access trench running under the shutter, half blocked by a warped support beam. "Your truss route?" "Fastest ugly route, yes. We take it together. My command deck sits 2 compartments beyond. Once inside, I can feed you thruster timing directly and isolate cautery net from my internal bus." He frowned. "You can isolate a wartime legal AI from inside your ship?" "I can make it wait in line." That might be the most romantic sentence I've heard from a systems perspective. She stared at him for one measured second. "Do not define romance while rounds are incoming." "Fair." They went low into the trench. The space smelled of wet metal and overheated insulation, close and bitter. Maya had to turn his shoulders to clear the support beam, exosuit scraping with a sound like teeth on ceramic. Vera passed through with less wasted motion, then doubled back when his harness snagged, slicing the twisted bracket free in one quick motion. Halfway through, the trench opened into a junction pocket where emergency med crates had burst open, scattering white ampules and thermal blankets across grating slick with coolant. A young Lynx crew tech huddled behind a crate with a burned sleeve and a diagnostic slate clutched to her chest. She saw Vera and straightened by instinct, ears pinned despite pain. "Status," Vera said. "Primary nav desynced, my lady. Dependent cradles stable. 2 sedation pumps through faults, rerouted manually." The tech's gaze flicked to Maya, to his human face behind a scratched visor, then back. "Station guns tagged as hostile." "I am aware." Vera touched the tech's shoulder once, brief and firm. "Fall back to ward compartment and seal. This technician is under my protection." The tech nodded, relief and confusion mixing in her expression, and crawled toward the aft hatch. Maya tracked the words, "under my protection," as if they were another warning line on his HUD. In Lynx space, those words had weight, legal and social and potentially ruinous for anyone using them lightly. Here, in a burning corridor, they were also practical. Allied gunners would stop wondering whether to shoot him on sight. They reached the inner hatch to Vera's vessel just as decompression alarms switched pitch from caution to imminent. The hatch frame had buckled, leaving a triangular gap at the base where atmosphere leaked in a thin white stream. Vera slammed her copied maintenance token against the reader. Nothing. She shoved Maya's original badge in. The reader chirped denial. She stripped the panel with claw tips, bypassed 2 wires, and drove power directly from her wrist module into the actuator. The lock motor screamed, hesitated, and cycled. "Committee design," she said. "Predictable." The hatch opened inward to a corridor lined with scored armor and emergency strips. Gravity shifted as his boots crossed threshold, station pull yielding to shipboard compensators running in damaged mode. The air inside was warmer, but carried the dense smell of stress, antiseptic, singed fabric, ozone, and lynx musk sharpened by fear and discipline. Behind them, the docking spine shuddered with another near miss. Ahead, a second hatch began to close on automatic safety. Vera caught Maya's wrist and pulled him through just before it sealed, her grip iron hard through his glove, and the sound of the lock, engaging behind them, landed like a verdict and a promise, both. The inner hatch's lock clunked into place behind them, and the noise changed from open war chaos to shipboard crisis. Tighter, lower, full of filtered alarms and stress machinery trying to pretend it still obeyed design tolerances. Maya pulled one breath through his suit and tasted recycled air overlaid with antiseptic vapor, hot wiring, and the feral musk of lynx bodies pushed past exhaustion. Vera did not release his wrist until she had scanned both ends of the corridor and keyed a command into the wall terminal with her free hand. "Ward corridor sealed," she said to no one visible. "Command deck. Confirm internal sentry recognition for human Maya Lee under my band right." A neutral synthetic voice answered from ceiling grills, clipped and faintly offended. "Recognition applied. Advisory. 7 interior weapon safeties remain in contested mode due to docking hostilities." Maya looked at her. "Your ship AI sounds like it files complaints recreationally." "It does," Vera said. "It learned from my legal office." She finally let go. The pressure marks from her glove ridges remained ghosted on his sleeve for a second before the fabric rebounded. They moved fast down the corridor, but not at the same kind of fast as the dock sprint. This was controlled urgency, the speed of people conserving precision. The ship rolled slightly against unstable clamps, gravity compensators lagging by a breath each time thrusters corrected. A strip of emergency lights flickered in amber pulses, making the hull panels look bruised. At every hatch they passed, Lynx crew in mixed uniforms glanced up, saw Vera, then saw the widow band locked around Maya's wrist, and shifted from challenge to startled compliance. The command deck opened on the third bulkhead and reframed everything he thought he was walking into. He had expected tactical displays, gunnery crews, command thrones built for intimidation. He got those, but draped through them was a different architecture entirely. 6 sedation cradles anchored where tactical benches should have been, each one cocooned in thermal mesh and pediatric monitors, each one holding a lynx cub small enough that their ears looked too large for their heads. Their breathing painted gentle waves across hollow screens that had been pushed aside for medical readouts. A nav altar near the forward glass held a fused signet ring in scorched silver, set in a cradle of burned wiring, as if someone had refused to choose between mourning and duty and simply welded both into place. Vera crossed the deck and checked each cradle in sequence before she addressed anyone else. She touched foreheads, adjusted one blanket corner, reseated a pulse lead that had lifted, and murmured 3 words in Lynx dialect to a cub whose tail thrashed in sedation sleep. Only when the 6th monitor stabilized did she turn to the officers waiting at stations. "Status," she said. A gray-muzzled Lynx medic with one mechanical eye answered first. "All dependents are alive. 2 still trending hypothermic, manageable. Sedation pump 3 and 5 are on manual cycle until your engineer restores stable power." "Your engineer." Maya felt the phrase land with a weight he had not approved and did not reject. A younger bridge officer at navigation spoke without looking away from her display. Station legal network continues hostile containment assertions. We are receiving contradictory directives from 3 authorities and 1 automated tribunal. Maya exhaled through his nose. Good to see confusion is cross-cultural. No one laughed. Vera gave him a sidelong look that was less reprimand than calibration, then stepped to the nav altar and braced one hand beside the fused signet. Up close, he saw what the corridor shadows had hidden. The fur along her left flank had been singed away beneath her coat edge, and a pressure wrap sat under the armor seam, dark with old seepage and field sealant. "You're hurt," he said. "Later," she replied. "Not if you fall over mid-command." "I will not." It was not bravado. It was doctrine, spoken as fact. That made it worse. By the time the station chronometer on Maya's visor ticked 4 minutes since they cleared the trench, the deck's latent threat had become intimate. A cub in Cradle 2 whimpered in sleep and clawed weakly at the air until Vera pressed 2 fingers to the child's wrist, and the monitor smoothed. Her own hand trembled once afterward, barely, then stilled so completely he might have imagined it if he had not spent half his life reading microfailure before systems collapsed. He walked toward the nearest power schematic projected in midair and forced himself to ask the question as a technician, not as a witness. "How long since you slept?" One officer looked offended on her captain's behalf. The medic did not. Vera answered anyway. 49 hours, perhaps 50. Why? Her ears tilted back a fraction, and for the first time since he met her, command polish thinned enough for the person underneath to show through. Clan widow doctrine. The ranking surviving consort remains wakebound until every dependent under convoy seal is in recognized ward custody. Sleep before transfer is interpreted as abandonment. Maya stared at her. "You're running a damaged war hull in contested dock space while sleep-deprived because of a ceremonial rule. It is not ceremonial to the children who watch whether I remain present." Her voice stayed level, but it roughened at the edges like overused metal. When the convoy was hit, they saw flame through nursery glass. They saw officers fail. They saw their parents die on comm. I do not vanish from their sightline until a ward authority signs for them in person. The medic spoke quietly, not challenging her, just laying truth on the table. Her neural stress indices have been above military safety thresholds for 13 hours. She rejected sedation twice. Vera's gaze flashed to him, then away. "Noted, surgeon." Maya looked from the cradles to the tactical overlay where docking spine 9 pulsed in angry red lines, then back to her hand resting beside the dead signet. He understood suddenly that the dangerous captain in station rumor and the sleepless guardian in front of him were not opposites. They were the same architecture, under different loads. "You could have transmitted the dependents and abandoned hull," he said. "Cut mass. Saved yourself a cleaner approach." She touched the fused ring with one claw tip, careful as if the metal might bruise. "This ship carried my mate home once. It carries his convoy children now. I do not abandon either." The deck rocked under a near impact. Several monitors shrilled at once. Cradle 5's temperature dropped half a degree. Vera moved before the alarms finished sounding, adjusted the thermal feed manually, and kept her palm on the child's chest until the numbers climbed back into range. When she straightened, fatigue was visible in the delay between intent and motion. Not dramatic, not collapsing, just fractions adding up. Maya had seen that in veterans before. The body paying invoices, the mind kept postponing. He tapped the widow band on his wrist. "Protection goes both ways today. You give me access. I keep your hull attached. You let the medic patch that flank while we run diagnostics." Her jaw tightened. Negotiating terms while my ship is under fire is bold for a contractor. Charging me with boldness can wait for debrief. A breath passed. Then she gave one short nod to the medic. Field patch only, 90 seconds. The medic was already moving with a spray applicator and seal strips. Vera stood still for the treatment, eyes on the forward glass, where tracer fire streaked outside like white wire dragged across night. She did not hiss when the sealant bit. Maya respected her for that and worried anyway. He turned to the systems pit and dropped into work mode hard enough that the room narrowed to process. I need your engineering chief, your docking bus map, and authority to override any command that prefers etiquette over physics. A broad-shouldered Lynx engineer with grease on her forearm stepped up from a lower console. Chief Rel, we lost 2 bus isolators and a quarter of our hull sensors. Tell me what to break. Maya pulled the dock schematic into a split display with shipboard power flow and station clamp telemetry. We don't break first, we reroute heat. E-clamp on the spine is running toward thermal runaway because cautery net keeps forcing containment postures. I'm going to vent your superheated coolant into a sacrificial loop through your cargo wash line. That buys us 30, maybe 40 seconds before the loop cooks. Rel bared teeth, not hostile, impressed. That line is not rated for this load. No, but it is available and thick-walled. Better an ugly pipe than a dead dock. Vera stepped to his other side, flank newly sealed, and studied the map with a predator's still focus. And C and D? Manual reseat from exterior truss. I'll need your thrusters to hold a non-standard angle while I spike the claws into alignment. You said 12 seconds without tearing manifold. I need 18 for legal manifest verification. Then we manufacture 6. Her eyes lifted to the tactical display. I can rotate 2 degrees starboard and let incoming rounds glance off our dorsal ridge. It gives us cover and shortens your exposure path. Rel pointed at the model. That puts stress on plate seam 21. Maya answered, Seam 21 is ugly but intact. I'll brace from station side with cargo cradle plating once we lock. This time, Rel did laugh. A short bark. Human. You repair like a scrapyard prophet. Pay me scrapyard rates and I'll write scripture. A few officers finally let out breath that sounded almost like relief. Humor was a pressure valve. He used it deliberately, then shut it and kept moving. He opened a channel to June through the ship relay. Interference clawed at the line before stabilizing. June, if you're alive and judgmental, I need external clamp timing confirmation and a route to inject treaty manifest into cautery net's legal core. June answered with immediate static and immediate attitude. Alive, judgmental, and disappointed you found a royal crisis without me. Sending timing feed now. Legal core path is maintenance backdoor Gamma 9 if station command hasn't welded it shut out of pride. Copy. You owe me a drink for every near-fatal suggestion. Add it to the tab. 3 days ago, dispatch logged your emergency call as pending clarification, by the way. Clarification arrived in the form of gunfire, apparently. Figures. Maya cut the channel and pushed June's data into the composite model. The competence turn did not feel heroic from inside. It felt like decomposition. One giant lethal problem, broken into solvable pieces and then attacked with stubborn hands. He assigned Rel to prep the sacrificial loop with thermal dampers scavenged from galley units. He reassigned 2 bridge officers from weapons to legal packet assembly, dictating exactly which widow right clauses had priority in cautery net's treaty hierarchy. He had the medic secure all cradles to secondary brackets for anticipated roll and asked, with quiet firmness, that someone keep speaking to the cubs during thruster maneuvers so they did not wake into silence. The medic nodded once. I will. Maya toggled his suit to external maintenance mode and laid tools on an auxiliary console in exact order, repeating the ritual under his breath, while the room moved around him. 1 for pulse, 2 for breath, 3 for hands steady. Vera heard him and said, almost too low for anyone else, "Your counting steadies the room." "It steadies me. Room gets collateral benefit." She held his gaze a moment, gold eyes tired and razor clear at the same time. "Then keep counting, Maya Lee." He sealed his helmet, checked magnetic line tension, and keyed the command deck to project docking clamps in real time across his visor. Outside, the firefight still stitched the dark with white heat. Inside, 6 children slept in borrowed safety, and a widow captain stood upright on discipline and painkillers, while a human contract tech prepared to bet all of them on torque, timing, and an old maintenance back door. When the loop pressure reached threshold and Rel called ready, Maya stepped onto the narrow exterior service crawl through the maintenance hatch, clipped in, and began reseating docking spine 9, one claw at a time. The truss was not merely narrow. It was a blade of frozen metal hung over vacuum and gunfire, vibrating under his boots with every glancing hit to Vera's hull, each tremor traveling up his shins and into the old fracture line in his knee, like a warning tapped on bone. Maya clipped his magnetic tether to the outer rail, planted his left boot in the maintenance notch, and drove the first spike into Clamp C's warped guide channel. The impact rang through his glove and came back as a dull ache in his wrist. "Timing window in 3, Vera said in his helmet, voice compressed by comm bandwidth and command discipline. 2, 1. Hold now." He leaned his weight onto the torch key and felt the claw assembly resist, then grind, then move a fractional degree toward true. Outside the dock shield, tracer lines burned white arcs through drifting ice crystals. Inside his visor, load numbers climbed, stalled, and then dipped by 0.5%. "C moved," he said. "Confirmed. You bought us 7 seconds of stability." "Great. Only need 11 more and a miracle." "I do not schedule miracles. I schedule outcomes." He barked a short laugh, breath fogging the lower rim of his visor. "That is the most captain thing anyone said to me today." He shifted forward along the truss, one hand over one hand, boots finding textured plates by memory and suit-like glare. Smoke leaked from docking spine 9 through fractured seams and froze in pale streamers when it hit the void-facing cold. Beneath him, the station's curved hull dropped away in a black sweep, ribbed with service lights and emergency beacons, each one blinking like a pulse under bruised skin. By the 9th minute on the truss, his forearms had begun to shake from sustained torque load, and the tiny servos in his patched exosuit whined every time he changed angle. He ignored it and pulled up the next sequence. Clamp D had twisted off-axis and was biting its own teeth. If he forced it without relief, it would shear. If he hesitated, E would run hot enough to transfer failure downline. "Rel, loop status," he said. Chief Rel answered from shipboard engineering, voice rough and amused despite the circumstances. "Sacrificial loop is swallowing heat like a hungry furnace. We get 32 seconds until the wash line cooks and starts praying." 32 is luxury. In your world, maybe. He moved to D's service hatch and cracked it with the insulated cutter. A fan of sparks burst outward, bright as welding stars, and one burned a black fleck into his sleeve. He reached inside with the flex handle and found the manual release cam by touch, counting out loud to keep rhythm in his hands. 1 for pulse, 2 for breath, 3 for hands, steady. The comm stayed silent for a beat. Then Vera said, "Lower now, stripped of bridge formality. Keep counting." He pictured her on the command deck with one palm on a cradle rail, the other on a tactical console, sleep debt under her eyes and steel in her spine, and he realized he was no longer imagining a rumor with rank bars. He was imagining a person who had not sat down in 2 days because 6 children were breathing in the next compartment. "Window?" he asked. 5 seconds if I feather lateral thrusters and accept dorsal plate stress." "Take it." Her ship shifted under him in a controlled sideways pulse that pinned him against the truss rail. Incoming rounds that had been stitching his lane glanced off the vessel's armored ridge instead, ricocheting wide in harmless sparks. It was not brute force. It was geometry, timed and deliberate, and it gave him exactly the gap he needed to yank the cam through its lock notch and slam the clamp jaw back into alignment with 2 magnetic spikes and a heel strike. Load dropped 3 full points. He exhaled hard. "Deaceted." "Confirmed. Maya." A fraction of pause. "Well done." No officer had said those words to him in years without attaching a corrective clause. He swallowed, not trusting his voice for a second, then forced it steady. "We still need manifest verification." "We will get it." A new burst chewed across the truss behind him. He ducked, shifted to retreat, and his right boot slid on a skin of refrozen coolant he had not seen in the strobe flicker. His center of gravity went wrong all at once. The torque key flew from his grip, bounced once, and spun into darkness. His tether caught, then jerked as a second hit struck the rail, and the magnetic clasp at his belt snapped with a sound too small for what it meant. His body dropped into open space. The world narrowed to suit alarms and the hard yank of his shoulder harness as his secondary line deployed late. He swung under the truss, slammed hip first into the underside bracing, and saw stars burst across his vision. His left hand clawed for purchase and found only frozen plating. "Maya," Vera said, no longer clipped, no longer formal. "Answer." "Still here," he grunted through clenched teeth. "Line failed primary, I'm hanging." "Do not release." "Wasn't on my to-do list." A hatch above him banged open. He saw armored boots, then Vera herself, dropping to one knee at the edge, one hand braced on the hatch frame, the other reaching down through drifting coolant haze. She'd clipped her own safety line to the hull ring without waiting for escort. Station rounds snapped past, close enough to throw sparks off the hatch lip, and she ignored them with the focused fury of someone who had already chosen her priorities. "Give me your forearm," she ordered. He swung once, caught her wrist guard, missed, then caught on the next arc. Her grip clamped over his gauntlet with predatory strength and hauled, muscles in her shoulders straining under the scorched coat. He kicked against the truss, underside, found a rung, and together they dragged his weight back to the hatch rim. He sprawled half across her boots, chest heaving, suit alarms complaining in 3 tones at once. For one suspended second, neither moved. Then, Vera leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his helmet, right where the visor seal met the brow plate. The gesture was brief, almost private, despite the open comms, heat through armor and glass, a contact point steadier than any spoken oath. "Accepted," she said softly, in Lynx's first language and then in Station Common. "Under my protection. By my choice." Her gloved fingers tightened once around the widow band at his wrist as if sealing it. Maya's throat worked around air that felt suddenly too thin. "Copy," he said, and his voice came out rougher than he intended. "Understood." She pulled back and the command cadence returned, but it did not erase what had just passed between them. "Back inside. We finished this from the inner rail route." He got one knee under him and shook his head. "No. He still needs manual hardlock on station side, or cautery net will classify drift and cut us anyway." "Your shoulder took impact." "It still lifts tools." Gold eyes held his visor for a hard, measuring beat. "Then you do not go alone." He managed a breath that almost became a grin. Was hoping you'd say that. They moved in tandem along the inner rail, her ahead by half a step, her body taking the exposed angle each time fire raked the truss. She did not ask him to trust her, she kept giving him reasons to. The crashback came as a voice, calm and synthetic, cutting through every channel at once. Cautery net escalation notice. Final purge protocol initiated for docking spine 9. Plasma cutter array cycling in 90 seconds. Maya felt the words like ice water down the spine. Around them, sirens changed tone from hazard to terminal action. On his HUD, new red vectors appeared. 6 cutter tracks marching toward civilian tube junctions in precise, indifferent lines. Jun broke onto a side channel, breathing hard. Maya, tell me you heard that. Heard it. Station Command just surrendered purge authority to the legal corps. They're calling it necessary containment. You have one chance to override with treaty hierarchy before cutters go live. Path? Gamma 9 maintenance backdoor still exists, mostly because no one remembers it except angry technicians and cockroaches. But it needs dual validation now. Dockside physical lock and vessel-side legal packet in the same 10-second window. Maya looked at the clamp graph, at Vera's thruster readouts, at the cutter countdown bleeding away. Then we make the window. He patched Jun into shipcom and spoke fast. Rel, prep backflow, inject on docking bus. Bridge, load widow right verification plus dependent manifest with biometric signatures. Not summaries, full chain. Vera, I need your ship angled 2 degrees port, then held dead steady for 10 seconds while I hardlock E at non-standard pitch. 2 degrees port exposes my aft quarter. It also puts your hull between those cutters and Tube 5 civilians. Done. No hesitation. The deck jolted as she pushed the command through. Outside, her vessel rolled with deliberate grace, armor plates catching incoming fire and shedding it in sparks. The move opened a narrow channel to clamp E's access throat. Maya dropped to the panel, tore off the scorched cover, and met a wall of radiant heat that made his visor tint to maximum. Coolant screamed through the line behind the bulkhead like a river forced through a pinhole. He slid in an insulated plating shard from a cargo cradle brace, bridging a live conduit to a sacrificial loop just as Rel vented pressure from shipside. Steam blasted past his gloves in a white roar. He drove 2 spikes, rotated the clamp jaw 5 degrees beyond nominal tolerance, then slammed the manual lock pin home with the butt of his cutter handle. The whole spine shuddered and held. Physical lock achieved, he shouted. Packet ready, said one of Vera's bridge officers, voice tight. Awaiting authority code. Vera keyed in without looking away from tactical feeds. Authority Tal Vera, Widow Consort, convoy seal intact, transmit. Maya opened Gamma 9 from the maintenance side, fingers moving on burned touch points, and injected the packet straight into Cauterinett's legal core with the kind of access path no admiral ever thanked and every dock survived on. For 3 endless seconds, nothing happened. Then the synthetic voice returned, still calm, now fractionally altered as if swallowing its own certainty. Treaty conflict detected. Dependent ward protections verified under Accord Tier 7. Purge protocol suspended pending tribunal review. Plasma cutter array de-energizing. Across the hullscape, cutter vectors winked from red to gray. Jun made a sound over comm that might have been laughter or relief, failing to choose. You did it. You stubborn, underpaid menace. Maya sat back against the bulkhead and let his helmet touch metal, eyes shut for 1 breath. 2. Send that to payroll. Gunfire tapered in uneven bursts, then in singles, then in scattered echoes as Allied platforms adjusted recognition tables to the Widowband Authority and the updated legal status. The dock did not become safe. It became survivable. Vera crouched beside him, one knee on steel, one hand braced near his shoulder, without touching until he looked at her and nodded. Only then did her palm settle briefly against his upper arm, steady and deliberate. "Status," she said, but the word carried more than diagnostics now. "Bruised, overheated, offended by station governance," he said. "Operational." "Same." She rose and offered her hand. He took it and stood, slower this time, shoulder protesting. Together they watched the clamp telemetry stabilize into green bands edged with amber. Ugly, but holding. Inside the ship, 6 cradle monitors continued their quiet rhythm. Small breathing waves on a tactical screen that had finally stopped screaming. External conflict had crashed back in and broken against them. Not ended, not erased, but answered. "Command deck wants you for debrief and legal witness tagging," Vera said. "Do I get a chair this time?" "If you insist." "Bold of you to promise luxury." A tired, razor-thin smile crossed her face. "Do not make me revoke your title privileges, technician." He flexed his gloved hand once, felt the widow band settle against his wrist, and followed her toward the hatch, while docking Spine 9, scarred and smoking, remained locked to her ship because 2 people had chosen skill over protocol at exactly the right second. The command deck lights had shifted from combat red to exhausted amber by the time Maya and Vera stepped back inside, and the change made every scrape, every scorch, every hastily tied pressure wrap look more human and less like symbols in a tactical sim. The cradles still occupied the center of the room where weapons consoles should have been. Cradle 2's tiny patient had woken, eyes glassy with sedation, one paw curled around the edge of a thermal blanket, as if testing whether the world would hold. The medic murmured in the Lynx dialect and smoothed the child's ear flat again. Maya's visor opened with a soft, hydraulic sigh. Station air hit his face in a warm, metallic wash that smelled of antiseptic, burnt resin, and the faint sweetness of coolant vapor finally cooling. Rel tossed him a folded cloth and pointed at his gloves. "You are dripping conductive slurry on my deck." "Means I care," Maya said, wiping his hands anyway. "It means you owe me a wash line manifold." "Put it on my tab," with Jun's bad advice. At the sound of his name, Jun's channel pinged through ship relay, cleaner now that the jamming had died. "I heard that. Also, dispatch just reclassified your incident ticket from pending clarification to mission critical exemption, which is bureaucrat for we were wrong and please don't sue us." Maya let out a breath that turned into a laugh he had been postponing for an hour. "Archive my maintenance log under routine maintenance like I asked." "Done. With your name spelled right. Took 3 arguments and 1 threat involving public records." "Beautiful. Keep the file mirrored." "Already did. And Maya, security found your emergency beacon still blinking under that pylon. They're returning it with ceremony, apparently. Dock workers now have a betting pool named after you. Hate this for your peace and quiet." The channel clicked off before Maya could answer. Vera had been listening without interrupting, one hand resting on a cradle rail, the other on the edge of the nav altar beneath the fused signet. When he looked at her, she tilted her head slightly toward the forward hatch. "Debrief," she said, "while memory is sharp." The debrief chamber on Spine 9 had once been a freight conference room. It still smelled like polymer crates and stale stimulant brew under the cleaner they sprayed after emergencies. One wall display carried the station crest. Another carried Cautery Net's legal feed in dense text columns that scrolled too fast for anyone who had ever held a wrench for a living. Maya sat in a reinforced chair that was too clean for his suit, and watched water bead off his sleeve cuffs onto the deck. Across from him, Vera sat upright despite visible fatigue, widow band absent from her own wrist and still locked around his. Present were Station Commander Iscott in a white coat gone gray at the collar, 2 legal clerks, the gray-muzzled medic, Chief Rell, and 1 Marine from the dock with a cracked knee plate and a stare that had gone from suspicion to professional respect. Katerinet attended as a voice and a document stream. Commander Iscat began with formal doctrine and ended, unexpectedly, with a bow of his head toward Vera and then toward Maya. Record states purge. Authorization was lawful under hostile provisional classification, and unlawful once dependent manifest was validated. This station acknowledges delayed recognition. Casualty projection indicates that without manual clamp intervention, civilian loss would have exceeded 300. He looked at Maya directly. You requested traffic freeze and were denied. That denial is under review. Review fast, Maya said. Half-dropped shutters created a kill funnel. Whoever signed that maintenance deferment should spend 1 shift crawling under their own design. A legal clerk bristled. Iscat raised 1 hand and said, Noted for structural tribunal. The Marine with the cracked knee plate leaned forward. Also noted, Technician Lee pulled me out of a fall under live fire before he had legal cover. Put that in the minutes. The clerk hesitated, then typed. Katerinet's voice entered neutral as vacuum. Inquiry item. Asymmetrical clamp failure on 9A through 9D. Cause pattern suggests non-random interference plus layered legacy firmware. Maya glanced at Jun's mirrored file on the side screen, then back to the tribunal. Asymmetry came from 2 things. First, committee patching over emergency code during peacetime compliance updates. Second, a hostile packet piggybacked on customs security handshake and toggled release logic in pairs. It wasn't elegant sabotage. It was opportunistic and dirty. Rel bared her teeth in agreement. We recovered packet fragments from our bus. Same signature family as Black Market Impound Farms. The room went still in the way rooms did when structural injustice stopped being abstract and got a tool mark. No dramatic villain emerged. No confession. No chase. Just systems built to mistrust the wrong people at the worst moment, then exploited by whoever watched those systems long enough. Katerinet spoke again. Resolution. Purge suspension precedent established under Accord Tier 7, when dependent manifest and widow rights verification are concurrently delivered through authorized maintenance channel. Protocol library updated. Maya stared at the scrolling text. So, next time it won't try to carve through civilian tubes while asking for forms. Correction, said Katerinet. Next time it will ask for different forms. Even Vera's mouth twitched at that. By station midnight, statements were signed, tool losses inventoried, and injuries treated. Maya sat on a supply crate outside the ward compartment while a quartermaster read from a tablet like a priest at a strange liturgy. 1 insulated cutter, returned. Edge pitted. Magnetic spike case, returned. 12 expended, 6 recovered. Flex handle set, returned. Emergency beacon, returned, battery at 22%. Torque Kai. Gone, Maya said. Spun into open void when I slipped. Quartermaster nodded and marked it abandoned in action. Access badge. Maya held up the scuffed card. Returned. Copy token invalidated. Invalidated and archived under emergency interoperability exception. The quartermaster's brows rose as he read the next line. You are now authorized for temporary cross-deck movement under TAL convoy protection. Try not to make that permanent by accident. Story of my life. When the quartermaster left, the young Lynx crew tech from the trench, burn sleeve now replaced, ears no longer pinned, approached with 2 thermal cups. She set one beside him, sat 2 crates away with formal posture, and said, "I looked at you like a threat earlier. I thought Command had sent a human observer to certify our impound." Maya blew across the hot liquid and winced at the bitter, resin-heavy taste. "Fair assumption on this station." "I was wrong." She touched 2 fingers to her brow in a Lynx courtesy he had only seen from officers. "You kept the ward lights on." He nodded once, uncomfortable with praise and unwilling to reject it. "You kept sedation pumps alive on manual while under fire. We all did the ugly part." 3 days later, the ward transfer happened in daylight through Bay 4, where the air smelled of wet metal, sealant foam, and bakery steam from a vendor who had reopened, because crisis or not, people still needed bread. No gunfire. No red strobes. Dock workers lined the railings in patched jackets and clean shirts, pretending they were present for routine cargo movement, while obviously there to witness history in the work boots. 6 cradles rolled down the gangway under medic escort. Each cub wore a small ident band and a knitted ear cover in clan colors. Vera walked beside them in full dress coat with morning sash. Maya walked on the opposite side in a repaired exosuit with fresh stitching over the shoulder seam. At the ward gate, a civilian authority from the Refuge Accord office verified each dependent in person, palm to scanner, name to signature, breath by breath. The doctrine had demanded that Vera remain wake-bound until transfer. On the final scan tone, the official said, "All 6 accepted into protected ward custody under convoy designation TAL." Silence held for 1 beat. Then the dock released its breath. Vera's shoulders dropped a fraction so small most people missed it. Maya did not. She turned to the medic. "Now," she said. The medic produced a sedative patch with theatrical patience. At last. Vera accepted it, pressed it to her own wrist, and closed her eyes for 3 seconds while it took effect. When she opened them again, the edge in her movements had softened from steel cable to tempered wire. By the first week of October, the formal contract sat on a steel table in Operations Annex C, between a chipped mug and a tray of machine oil samples that someone had forgotten to move. Jun leaned against the wall, pretending not to eavesdrop. Rel stood with arms folded. Commander Iscott attended as witness, looking like a man relearning humility in real time. The contract title read, "Civilian Chief of Hull Integrity, Toll Refuge Convoy, Accord Compliant Independent Status." Maya read every clause, crossed out 2 lines that would have let Station Legal reassign him without consent, added language for shared command authority on safety decisions, and inserted a mandatory maintenance labor seat in convoy planning sessions. Vera watched him edit without impatience. "You negotiate like a saboteur," she said. "I repair like one too. Keeps institutions honest." Iscat cleared his throat. "Station command accepts amended terms." Jun muttered from the wall, "I need this framed." Maya signed first. Vera signed second with a claw-tipped stylus that etched deep enough to mark the plate beneath the paper layer. Iscott countersigned. Rel stamped engineering concurrence with obvious satisfaction. When the room emptied, only Maya and Vera remained by the viewport overlooking docking spine 9. The spine still bore scars, replaced paneling in mismatched shades, new warning paint around the old kill funnel angles, fresh actuator housings where half-lowered shutters had been rebuilt with manual releases reachable from deck level. The Widow crest now hung beside the station insignia on a permanent Accord banner. Tribunal ratification had posted final. Cautery net review was formally closed. No charges were filed against Maya Lee or Captain Consort Vera Tall, and Accord status stood as permanent law. Vera removed the widow band from Maya's wrist and held it between them for a moment, then set it on the table and slid a new band across instead. Plain alloy, no morning slash, just a narrow inscription in Lynx script and station common. Mine by accord, if you consent. Maya met her gaze and answered without theatrics, steady as torque on a stubborn bolt. Mine too, if we write the terms together. We already did. He fastened the band. Outside, dock traffic resumed in slow, deliberate lines, clamps engaging with the heavy, reassuring sound of machinery doing what it was built to do. Inside, they turned toward the debrief hall, not as captain and expendable contractor, not as roomer and background labor, but as partners under daylight law, carrying tools, signatures, and a precedent. Neither bureaucracy nor fear could roll back.